This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
Where science meets spirit in the future of healing. And in this rare joint interview, psychotherapist Melanie McGhee joining us again, and Professor Emeritus joining us, research consultant, of course, and mindfulness-based stress reduction, that's MBSR teacher, Dr. David Patterson. They are here to pull back the curtain on their upcoming manuscript, which is really an ambitious, deeply human exploration of how real transformation happens. Now, together, they weave psychology, contemplative practice, neuroscience, and non-dual philosophy into a framework that helps people move beyond coping and into authentic freedom, equal parts intellectual and soulful. This conversation reveals the heart of their collaborative writing process, their shared vision for the future of mental health, and the real stories of transformation that inspired the book. Agents and listeners alike will hear a crystal clear message. This book is timely, necessary, and filled with the kind of wisdom our culture is hungry for. So, got to thank you both for being here and for joining us. And really, got to start off by asking, what inspired, you both to collaborate and write this book together, if you don't mind sharing.
Sure, I'll start. We are in a place in our lives where, after decades for David of teaching and engaging in research and serving in our community, and for me, practicing and teaching and serving our longtime personal practices, that we're in a place where we can finally make this offering, because we know that people are coping isn't enough anymore. People want real freedom, and we know it's possible, and we want to help people find that.
There's also a remarkable convergence now of the neuroscience of how the brain works, our psychological understanding of change and transformation, and also a recognition and an embracing of the wisdom traditions that meditation practices and other healing practices are flow out of. And so there's that coming together of those streams of thought and tradition, and we want to try to the best of our ability to give voice to that.
Well, I've heard so much about you and our audience here, Dr. David. So it's exciting to actually have you here with us today, because Melanie obviously speaks very highly of you and your co-collaboration all these years. So thank you, for both for being here, for joining us, and let's continue to talk more about AAIT and really this collaborative. Why do you think right now really is this the right time for this cultural moment, shall we say, for this message?
David, do you want to take that? Do you want to start?
Well, as I indicated, there's a hunger among many elements of our society at various levels of our society for interventions and healing that works, that's efficacious, that actually works, that doesn't take an extended period of time, and that goes directly at the problem without having to trudge around in the past.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That like you said, Jill, people are hungry and they're suffering. And we all know, it's been in the news a lot, we are in the middle of a mental health crisis. We need systemic approaches that are effective, efficient, reliable, things we can count on that really get work for people.
Great. Well, in our conversation today, obviously, I want to hear from, both of you, and also find out, why do you think that this really, needed to be a joint project? I love that you've been doing this for so long, and we want to talk about the whole central idea as well, and or promise of, the manuscript as well, of course.
Well, I come at this with practice experience as a licensed clinical social worker in private practice, as a psychotherapist, and teaching and mentoring psychotherapists for many, many years now. So my my grounding is in the practical application, and David's grounding is in science and understanding why this actually works. And he brings a gravitas and a depth of understanding that I can't bring because of my experience.
Gosh.
I needed that, David. I don't know what you would say about that, but I needed David's perspective.
Go
Well,
ahead, David.
I think that that's absolutely true. That I mean, these protocols have been passed on and have emerged in acceptance and integration training. But your teacher Jivarad and others have contributed to this work in your training and my training, and I think that that's really important. That oftentimes models of psychotherapy emerge, and it appears that they just have come from nowhere. And we've been real intentional in the book of pointing to who our teachers were and who influenced them, because it helps readers understand that this is not just something that popped up and popped out of Melanie's brain, although it partially did. But nonetheless, it also is the coming to fruition of the wisdom and training and teachings of the multiple psychotherapy teachers and spiritual teachers.
Thank you, David.
So can I ask, why do you think people are really ready for this? And we'll talk a little bit about the gap in mental health and spiritual landscapes.
I think people are ready for this because traditional talk therapy has real limits these days. Things are moving too fast. Healing doesn't have to take years.
Yeah.
When we take responsibility and our state with reliable tools, transformation becomes fast and easy, and we can find freedom from the stories and the narratives that have shored up our experiences.
Yeah, I also think that you see in the larger community, and this has changed dramatically in the last 30, 40 years, just a willingness to look beyond standard answers that come out of psychodynamics, psychotherapy, and cognitive behavioral psychotherapy, and also come from the meditation traditions, where there is now and this has occurred in the last 40 years from the work of John Kabat-Zinn and multiple other researchers, that there is a science of what happens, how we are transformed in meditative practices and practices that engage us beyond our thinking, that engage the body, the somatic healing.
Yeah, beyond our thinking and beyond our storytelling, beyond stories that we construct and live through and make decisions through. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I don't know if you guys want to piggyback more because you guys really know what you want to get into. And I don't want to jump the gun by asking you a question that may be out of order. But I want to thank you.
Well, just to add on to Melanie's comments about storytelling. I mean, one of the things that has emerged in, and we think happens in AAIT, is that, and this is emerging in the literature around meditation, is that there is a quieting, that you can really think that there are two selves. There is the narrative self that this is me in the past, this is me in the present, this is me in the future.
Yeah.
That narrative conditioned self, that where we're conditioned to be continually express this story of who we are. And one of the things that happens in AAIT practices is that, especially at the end of a practice, is that there is a quieting of that narrative self and an expansion of the experiential self, of expanding into open, spacious consciousness. And that's really well demonstrated in emerging neuroscience.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
And did you want to discuss more about, the approach? Some people who also may be new to the conversation today may not even understand what AIT has never maybe heard of it. So if you don't mind just giving us a little recap as into, really this mindfulness-based stress reduction and all you all do together, it would be amazing if you could just give us a little bit of that backstory as well.
Yeah, we jumped into the deep end of the pool too
Yeah, yeah,
quickly.
yeah, which is okay. But if someone's new to the conversation, they're like, wow,
Yeah.
this sounds interesting, but what is it really?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Melanie, you want to address that?
Sure. So AAIT stands for Acceptance and Integration Training. It's the synthesis of my more than 4 decades of practice as a psychotherapist and study with master therapists around the world, and my own personal practice in meditation and contemplative study of non-dual philosophy. And what makes it different is that we operate within a framework that makes our sessions very efficient by identifying a single problem to address. And then we use one of many processes to help people metabolize and neutralize the charged energy. That means the thoughts, images,
Yep.
emotions, or sensations, have them all bound up. We help them untangle and get unbound from that tension. What happens afterwards, as David said, we typically enter a very spacious, open consciousness. But beyond that, which is awesome, is clients and ourselves, because we can use it with ourselves, we have access to our own wisdom about the situation that brought us into therapy in the first place. And so instead of relying on therapeutic clinical wisdom and the imposition of that and the speculation around that, clients have access to their own wisdom about the situation, and they have a clarity about what their next steps are regarding the problem. And it arises
Beautiful.
naturally.
Got it. Then would you mind just talking a little bit about your approach and how it's different, from what others may know of?
Yeah, so instead of coming in and talking about a problem with a personal relationship and what happened and what that person said and what I said and what they said and what I said and what they wanted and what I wanted, which could take a full hour, and how it impacted me and how it might have been like that other person who did something, like that's typically how a more much talk therapy could go. And instead we're like, okay, so you had this situation with this person, and what's the dominant feeling that you're having about it? I'm really angry at them. And then we would use one of these processes to help them become free of that anger. And in that, typically what happens is the client has more compassion, more empathy for themselves and the other person. So relationships become softer, more peaceful, a little easier to navigate very quickly, which is not what happens in like longer term therapy.
Beautiful.
And if I might add to that, the title of this model is Acceptance and Integration Training. Come to accept what things are and what's present and who they are without all of the conditioning, and integration. And one of the things central to this model, and Melanie, you correct me if I'm making things up, is that of integration. So as the problem issue is identified with all the thoughts, images, sensations, and then there is some sort of other, an opposite or some antithesis of that that's identified. Well, what happens as the problem comes out of memory, and it's often charged with energy of the trauma or the event. It comes into what's called working memory, which is our sort of ongoing moment-to-moment memory. And then the client is invited to come up with some alternative, some opposite, and that comes into working memory. And then there's an oscillation back and forth between the two. And what happens is, and this is borne out in the research and theory of other models as well, is that there is a taxing of the working memory. The working memory can't hold all of this turbulence and all of this calm. And there's a reconsolidation of the memory, without all of the charge. So the client can still remember the event and what happened, but there is a neutralization of the charge and the reconsolidation of the memory. I hope that almost makes sense.
No, it does.
Yeah, it's like the memory gets filed differently, it's no longer buzzing in the background with a lot of tension. It just gets filed differently. We can still see it, but it's like kind of like a Polaroid that's been left in the sun too long. It's
Yeah.
there, but there's no energy associated with it.
Beautiful. Well, do you want to go back to the manuscript a little bit and, talk more about that and the process of writing together? And then we'll get into the mental health aspect of everything as well that you're, obviously helping people with.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, writing together has been illuminating, challenging. We've been married for over 40 years, so we know each other quite well. And finding our way to writing together, like David is a scholar and has spent his decades in academia, and I've spent my decades mucking around in
Yeah.
people's stories, lives. So it's actually been really both inspiring and challenging, because we approach life similarly yet differently, and our writing style is very different, because I'm not an academic, and so that's been interesting.
Yeah, I think it's sort of central to um, the challenge was to find our respective voices and find a
Mm-hmm.
way to blend those respective voices in a single manuscript. So we've sort of taken a Dharma and Greg approach of Melanie knows the model and can articulate the model,
Yeah.
and my job is to try to ground it in the relevant theory and science that's available in the literature. And for me, it means it means practicing non-attachment to my little darlings of precious sentences that I think are beautifully constructed and they're absolutely not understandable. So it is an ongoing practice.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, because I will write, for instance, about acceptance. I'm telling stories about it, or I'm explaining
Mm-hmm.
what integration is. Acceptance is more recognized in psychotherapy. Integration is recognized as important, but having an actual mechanism to accomplish it is new. That's
Yeah.
very, very new with this approach. At 40 years, I had not come across anything that could reliably accomplish integration until I began studying with Slavinsky. So I'll be writing about integration, for instance, and I'll tell stories, and I come at it from my, a clinical, what it feels like, what it looks like, what might help it happen. And then David comes along and, well, here's the science behind what she's saying, because I don't have that.
Yeah.
It's like backing our way into it, because it definitely works. And thanks to David and a whole team of people have really begun to figure out what is the science behind this. And David does such a good job of just explaining and referencing the science behind the work.
Beautiful. And do you want to talk a little bit about, the two of you together, though, being together a couple in a sense, or do you guys ever disagree? Just curious. Is there
Oh,
any
all the time.
challenges with this? Okay. So you're a normal couple. Good, good.
Yeah, we have weekly meetings, and the weekly meetings, like, we have a very solid agenda, but more than that, we have an important intention to, like, really meet each other with respect and kindness. And like David said, not be too precious about our darlings, because we're both writing. And it's a really interesting phenomena to write about something that we care deeply about and passionate about this. But if the other person doesn't understand it, or if the other person
Yeah.
says you're not landing with it, we have to be very, very open-minded with each other, which is actually great for a relationship. Challenging all the time, but it's great.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you for sharing that. Do you want to talk about some of the most, I guess, is there any moments or stories that you want to share from working, that really has stayed with you all?
I'll start that one thing that really, there's a couple actually. One is uh, it's hard to write a book. It's
Yeah.
hard to write a book with your partner. It's hard to write a book about something that is entirely new. There's nothing else like this. And maintaining inspiration for that, I often think of one of the scholarship recipients who received this training, and her sharing in the training a story about meeting one of her students in the hall, and the student was very, very upset. She works in a school, and the student was very upset, and the student needed to was going to
Yeah.
have to go to an important meeting to avoid going to juvenile detention, and the student was avoiding that, and it was important. It was happening. She had to get her stuff together to be able to make that meeting. And the therapist told us about what happened, said 5 minutes. She was no longer crying. She was solid. She said, I got this, miss. I'm not going to share the name. I got this. And then the therapist said, nobody could tell me that I wasn't a hero that day. And she has
Hmm.
tears in her eyes, because this is
Aw.
why we want to help people like in the moment with their lives. And I just love that phrase. Nobody could tell me that I wasn't a superhero. So that story really stays with me and helps inspire me in this work.
What about you, David?
Um, so I have been witness to the emergence of this model and in Melanie's years and years and years of training and working to refine and clarify and take feedback and reject feedback and take feedback when it circles back around.
Yeah.
Um, and so and also many of the, not all, but many of the students who have been trained in this model are students who I taught over my 31 years at the
Yeah.
University of Tennessee College of Social Work. And so it's just been remarkably rewarding to watch them embrace and practice and deliver the ripple effect of delivering this form of care out into the community and to communities across the country, because there's now over 150 clinicians who have been trained in this in the fellowship training, which is a 7-month training. So what's striking to me is that the continual rippling out of people being trained and what they're training, how that impacts the lives of people across the country.
Did you want to talk a little bit about, I guess, do you want to back up a little to the mental health and how this really has been helping so many people? And if people can't change, right? Let's talk about how they would embrace this new model.
Well, I think one of the things that people are often stuck in managing symptoms in mental health care and mired in
Hmm.
stories, trying to find the root of their suffering,
Yeah.
like what happened to me that I feel so broken? What happened to me that I can't seem to deal with anxiety, get past the trauma, make my relationships work, stop using substances, all the things that people struggle with. And having the means to help people do that quickly in the middle of, again, a mental health crisis where people need rapid care, that's a big, big driver for me.
Yeah, I think it's important to emphasize that this is both uh, a brief intervention targeted at acute emotional turbulence, but it is also a model that can be iterative, that clients can come back the next week and say, I did this, that worked, now here's the next step. So it is a stepwise process that is highly focused, as opposed to that sort of open, well, what do you want to talk about this week? And that trying to trudge around in the detritus of one's past that may not be, which is oftentimes less than efficient.
Yeah, I want to follow up on something David just said, because I think this is a fascinating aspect of the model,
Sure.
is once we resolve one issue, it's like our own inherent wisdom and awareness takes over
Yeah.
and to where the next piece of work is for our personal well-being. So it's very led by the client, like David was saying, instead of going into this open storytelling that can go on forever. Clients and once we resolve one issue, our own wisdom says, "Oh, here, this is what you need to take a look at, and this is what you can heal next." So it's this ongoing
Yeah.
process of healing for some people.
Beautiful. And next, do you want to talk a little more about, science meeting spirit in this work? And we'd love to hear more about neuroscience and supporting the approach.
David,
Well,
yeah,
okay. All right. So I think that one of the things that quickly, because as an academic, I can just gas on for a long time, but I'll try to be very concise. Uh, One thing that's been mentioned is non-duality, and that may be an unknown term to many of your listeners.
Yeah.
And non-duality is the recognition of the interconnectedness of everything. And one of the experiences that can occur out of AAIT and also out of deep meditation practice is that boundless expansion of consciousness that does not have a subject. It doesn't have an object. It's subject without object, which may be somewhat confusing, but it is that sort of loss of is expansive and loss of differentiation of self and other, self and object.
it all
And
feels the same.
yes, the recognition is all the same. And what has emerged in the neuroscience is there is active work to try to understand what happens in the brain. There's a recognition that we can see this in fMRI studies and in fMRI studies in particular, that there is this change in the networks of the brain that are active and a diminution of networks in the brain that oftentimes perpetuate that, what I referred to earlier as the narrative self. And so that's what's fascinating is that we are gaining greater and greater understanding of what is it that
Yeah.
practices like AAIT and practices like meditation do to connect us with the transcendent.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Well, we also are just almost out of time, and there's, of course, still always so much more to talk about. So I don't know if you want to kind of wrap it up for us in a sense. Melanie, where do you want to go next? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I really want to thank you both. I want to thank David for coming on. It's so helpful to hear that perspective about this is not just something that came out of my brain.
No, of course.
There's actually science behind it. And if I just hope that if listeners have been, inspired in some way, if it's got
Yeah.
stirred up about something or feel a little curious or hopeful, we'd really love for them to visit learnaait.com and join us where we have a free introductory webinar coming up. And it's a beautiful, beautiful way to experience this work and meet the community behind it. That just come see what's possible. People don't have to.
Aw.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks
And
for
it's
this opportunity.
obviously, no, thank you. We want you to visit learnaait.com. And again, as you mentioned, right, it's a free introductory webinar, a really beautiful way to experience the work and meet the community all behind it. So hopefully this conversation really has stirred something in you, some hope, curiosity, and there's always time and learning for growth. And love that you all are eager and willing to help so many. Thank you again for being here, okay?
All
Thank
right.
you,
Take
Jill.
care.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.